purpose of this essay is to identify the iconographic features of the classical Hollywood Western film High Noon. Research findings that are drawn out from the academic readings of Grant's book on iconography, Bazin's Evolution of the Western, and Warshaw's The Westerner will be referenced to further understand the terms and definitions of iconography in cinematic films. Each identified feature or aspect that is categorized as an iconography of the film will be analyzed in order to understand their purpose and deeper meaning. Iconography are the visible symbols and physical objects that usually represent a specific theme or concept according to an art historian named Erwin Panofsky. Iconography in films, however, are similar yet different at the same time, similar in a way that iconography helps categorize films into specific genres, just as how art is separated into different styles. Though it does not focus on hidden meanings or metaphors in a story. Instead, iconography in genre films refer to the particular objects, archetypal characters, and even specific actors. A good example of this is the setting and time of every Western movie, which would usually take place in the Wild West in a small town during the era of the American frontier. Our main character would normally be a gunslinger, just like Will Kane, who is the main character in High Noon. Grant referred to these aspects as the inner and outer forms of a film. The inner form are aspects of a film that is not represented with a physical object such as character arcs, plot turning points, or even archetypal characters, while the outer form are the physical and visible aspects of the film such as prop, settings, and even dialogue that helps identify its genre. High Noon undoubtedly was a film that was in a way new and bold to its previous predecessors of old Western films, mainly to the foreseen after effects of the conclusion of World War II. Bazin stated that the war had a massive influence in the evolution of the Western, since the American audience are either changing their interest or gaining new views about the world, especially those who are coming back home from the war. Before, the formula of the Western solely focused on the accuracy of American history. But with the ever changes of the American people, things needed to be different yet stick to its basic roots, which gave birth to a new generation of Western films like High Noon. That, of course, inevitably created a new iconographic features, which will be discussed further. By far, the most iconic icon in any Western film is the gunslinger himself, or as Warshaw would refer to as the Westerner. No classic Western can be really complete without this character. They aren't only just our main character of the film. The Western hero is usually the most recognizable icon that suggests to audience that the film that they are watching is a Western film. Though why is this the case? What makes this character so iconic? Is it the way he dresses, or is it more about his personality and motives? To answer this, we must first understand who the Westerner is, and what are his specific iconographic features that makes himself so recognizable. In our chosen film, our Westerner is Will Kane, a formerly retired sheriff of a mid-sized town. We begin his story on the day of his wedding. The film does not take long to inform us that he was previously a marshal by showing us another iconographic feature, the star-shaped sheriff's badge. During the first act of the film, we get to learn more about Will Kane's character, including his personality. We know that he is a man of honor and justice, mainly due to his previous duties as sheriff of the town, and overall his posture and attitude in the film gave off a very heroic vibe. We can also quickly spot the visible iconographic features that states he is the Western hero of the story. He wears the iconic cowboy hat, he carries around a single action army revolver, and the iconic gun holster wrapped around his waist, and as previously mentioned, he wears the iconic sheriff badge, which are all objects in the film that are icons of the Western genre. Moving on, onto our third iconographic feature, the film introduces Will Kane's recently wedded bride Amy Kane, who played an important role as the character who will challenge and contradict Will Kane's morale on killing the bad guys. To provide some context, Will Kane decides to take up the mantle of sheriff once more after learning a previous nemesis of his has been pardoned from prison and is on his way to enact revenge on Kane. Whilst all of this is happening, Amy Kane does not approve of her husband's decision to stay and confront these convicts, for she does not believe in violence to be a solution. This specific conflict between these morals are quite important and is a great example of an iconographic feature, for Warshaw stated that if there's a woman he loves, she is usually unable to understand his motives, she is against killing and being killed. This is because in Western films, the woman usually comes from a different place of a well-civilized society, unlike Westerners' world, where it is all about survival of the fittest. Therefore, making a character such as Amy Kane seem wiser, even though that is not how Will Kane sees it. For in his perspective, the West is a place where men are men, and killing those criminals is the right thing to do, making Amy Kane the naive one. This leads on to the next and final iconographic feature of High Noon. What does he fight for? To further explain, we ask ourselves the question, what was Cain really fighting for in the film? At first glance, it may seem and look like the only reason to why he decided to stay and confront his enemies was his concern for his fellow townsfolk. He feared that if he did not stay, he would be leaving the town back into the hands of a criminal. Though as we progress further in the story, we see that none of the townspeople wanted Cain to stay. Even his fellow deputies insist that it would be best for him to leave. Yet Cain, no matter what anyone says, decides to stay and fight. This decision of his is then brought to light an idea that perhaps Cain's intentions are not as noble and heroic as they seem. In fact, one can argue that Cain was only looking out for his own needs, that his real reason for staying was to put down his enemies right there and then. For Cain did not want to live his life always looking over his shoulder with the constant anxiety of his enemies coming back for him. Warshaw best explained that the Westerner is meant to stand for justice and order as a reason to fight, which is true by all forms. Yet at the same time, he uses these two things as an excuse to get what he wants. For example, Will Kane fought and shot down those criminals for justice. But at the same time, it was a personal benefit for him because now that his enemies were dead, he can finally give up his badge and start a new life in peace with his wife, therefore, still making him to be the hero that triumphed. Overall, High Noon is a film that depicts numerous iconographic features that earns it the right to be called a classic Hollywood Western. For its usage of clear visible objects and aspects that are icons of the Western genre, such as the old Western town setting, Will Kane as the iconic Westerner, and his wife Amy who played the love interest. Finally, our film has its climax occur at the most iconic time and setting for any final showdown of a Western, at high noon. This specific time of day has become an iconographic feature for all Western films, for it symbolizes the conclusion of the story. It is normally where our Western hero will take his final stand. High Noon wraps up its film by pinning Kane to face his enemies all by himself, and as usual, our hero wins the battle and rides off to the distance.